Thank you. I will be facilitating the interview. I will let the panel introduce themselves, starting with Chair of the Policy Committee, Mayor Ross.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dr. Wong. As you know, I'm Andy Ross. I am the mayor of the city of Temple Terrace, and I also serve as the chair of the Policy Committee and vice chair of the TPO board. And I've been asked to tell you something that I know you as a current employee probably already know, but some of the other candidates may not. So as you know, the executive director position reports directly to the board as a body, but for administrative purposes, it's folded under the umbrella of the Planning Commission, which in turn is under the umbrella of Hillsborough County. So administratively, you would fall under the rules of Hillsborough County and under the rules of the Planning Commission. But in terms of employment, you would work directly for the board. It's a little complicated in a way, but it works out, and I know you're very familiar with that. I would like to thank you for your interest in this position, and I know that all of us look forward to learning more about you and hearing more about how you feel you would excel in this position. And so thank you for your application, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Mayor, for the intro, and nice to see you again. Thanks for explaining the division of responsibilities.
Next on camera, we have Melissa Zornita.
Morning, I'm Melissa Zornita. Hi, Johnny. I'm the executive director of the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. We're the independent long-range planning agency for all 4 local governments here in Hillsborough County. And the staff to the TPO is a part of our team. Thank you.
Thanks.
Another member of the panel is Commissioner Myers. I'm not sure. I do not see her camera, but she would like to say a word. She is welcome to. Okay. And then we also have Commissioner Lynn Hertak, who is also on the panel as well. I do not see her on camera. So those are also on the panel. So now for some guidelines before we start the questions. Only the panelist, facilitator, and candidate will be asking the questions. No questions from the audience will be permitted. Chats will not be read aloud during the interview. The chats will be entered into the written record. Each interview is being recorded. Each interview is slated for an hour, and we will commit to that time. So everyone, please be concise with answers and any questions asked. So let's get started.
Right, thanks.
In your own words, please describe the various roles filled by the Hillsborough County TPO Executive Director and how your skills and experience match up with each role.
Thanks, Megan. I'm just jotting notes to make sure that I got the question. So
Sure.
in my own words, the various roles filled by the TPO Director. I would say that the TPO Director is expected to fill kind of a lot of roles actually, but for simplicity's sake, I would maybe break those down into 2 overarching divisions of responsibility. And I kind of see those as being first, the administrative, operations, managerial aspect in which the director has to ensure that we're accomplishing the tasks that are outlined in the Unified Planning Work Program. And, you know, because they're adopted into that work program, we've already committed to accomplishing them. But part of completing that responsibility, you know, successfully carrying out the UPWP is hiring personnel, training and mentoring them, assigning them to tasks in which we think that they'll succeed, and also making sure that they're happy and fulfilled with the work that they're doing. As far as my experience in that role of the director, I'm really happy to say that I'm the longest serving mentor who's been involved in the USF Urban Regional Planning MAPS program. MAPS stands for Mentoring a Planning Student. Pretty soon, my service will be going on 8 academic years. Internally, I've also volunteered myself to mentor a few junior staff members who were recent grads or coming to us from internships in the planning profession, but we're kind of looking for a little bit of guidance to figure out how to make that transition into a professional environment and how to work within like a medium-sized government agency.
Okay, would you say that one more time? You were.
Oh, someone couldn't hear me? Yeah, I was saying like I am the currently longest serving mentor in the USF MAPS program. So my volunteering in that capacity has allowed me to identify techniques to mentor junior staff, teach them how to succeed in a professional environment, basically teaching them how to serve as professional planners. The other aspect of the mentoring and identifying strengths of staff has been that I've voluntarily agreed to take on mentorship responsibilities with some of our junior staff internal to the agency.
Okay.
I'm going to take myself off
Oh,
of
there
mute.
you are. I see now.
I'm
Okay,
going to take
good.
myself off of mute to see what I get.
We can hear you now.
Good morning, Commissioner. So yeah, those two responsibilities I think help me better identify what skills and personnel are necessary to succeed at the TPO. And having worked within the constraints of the UPWP, I think I have a pretty good idea of what staff skills are important to allocate to each of the tasks outlined in that UPWP. And as far as like coaching and mentoring the staff just on my team, I'm really proud that in the past few years, I've made at least one very successful hire. I have a small team, but made one very successful hire. And I also have another member of my team who's going on 30 years of planning experience within the agency and county more generally. Recently, I've kind of challenged both of them to take on new assignments, get them out of their comfort zone and step into new roles within the agency. And you've seen their success, Roger specifically, and how he's presenting TIP amendments, Connor McDonald taking on a lot of federally required TPO core work products. And I think that they're doing a really good job. So the second role of the director, aside from the administrative managerial aspect, I would say is serving as kind of like the spokesperson for the TPO and for the Planning Commission. I would say that the director of this agency should be engaging and extroverted, seeking to build relationships with all the stakeholders, and that could span from like governing bodies of the local governments, planning staff at each of the local governments and Hart, Thea, Port Airport, elected officials, specifically at the local and state levels, but also federal officials. If given that opportunity, we should seek to build relationships with them. And of course, just like the people of Hillsborough County in general. Every time the executive director of this agency steps out the door, whether it's a work day or not, they're a symbol of the TPO's interests and policies and vision. And so I think it's a full-time job. I think my skills and experience match pretty well to that aspect of the role of director. My personality is to be straightforward and authentic. I like to think of myself as somebody who will tell you how it is and not just tell you what you want to hear. And I've used that authenticity to build positive relationships within the community with a lot of different groups across the county and even the region. I think when I look at some of the stakeholders to planning decisions, regardless of whether or not I agree with their interests, I think they look to me as a source of valid information. Whether they agree with my opinion or not, I think they can at least recognize that I'm giving them valuable information. And I think that that's one skill that you definitely seek out in a TPO executive director. I know I'm going way over, but like along that same vein, the agency over the past few years has placed a lot of trust in me to effectively represent the TPO. I've served as the committee liaison for the Intelligent Transportation System Committee. I'm a current member of the leadership group of the Tampa Bay Smart Cities Alliance, currently staffed as a liaison to the CAC, the Independent Oversight Committee. During its short life, while that was around, I was the liaison to that group. And, you know, I think I've done a pretty good job representing the TPO's interests, so fulfilled both sides of those roles.
Thank you. How can the TPO be most effective in working with our local, state, and federal governments regarding the TPO long-range planning process and moving transportation projects forward in our area?
Okay, so I got, how can the TPO be effective working with local, state, and federal governments or stakeholders regarding the LRTP?
Correct.
Well, we're committed to having a 3C process, one of those great acronyms that stands for continuous, coordinated, and comprehensive. That kind of ensures that the communication that we have with our partners is ongoing. I definitely agree with the tenets of that acronym, that better communication is key to developing a better long-range transportation plan. Specifically getting in touch with members of the community on a one-to-one or maybe small group basis, so that we can better tease out what their specific needs are at even more local scale, like neighborhoods, what neighborhoods want, what interests HOAs have in transportation. With our local governments and the public, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to improve communication among the TPO and to better liaise directly with the county, the 3 cities, Hart, via Port Airport. We already do a pretty good job of liaising at a staff level with the Planning Commission, but I think with the other entities that I've mentioned, we could probably improve that maybe by assigning specific staff to serve as direct liaisons to each of those entities. We already have advisory committees, which are intended to serve a similar purpose, but the format of that isn't necessarily the most amenable to communicating clearly and directly. You know, for one reason, like time is kind of limited. They have to make room and time for all the other agencies to identify their interests and needs as well. I think regular one-on-one or small group communication is one way that we could definitely improve that engagement and maybe identify better opportunities for collaboration. For the state, I would say that I think both the TPO and FDOT have done a pretty remarkable job of repairing our relationship over the past 3, 4, 5 years. When I first came onto the TPO, I remember that there was a lot of tension among the TPO, the community in District 7, TPO kind of being in the middle of a tension between certain aspects or certain segments of the community and District 7 related to TDX. Over those past few years that I mentioned, I've seen District 7 become more responsive to us, or at least it feels that they're more responsive to the concerns that we bring forth. It feels like they better understand our needs and our limitations and vice versa. As far as the 2050 long-range transportation plan update, I think that we've already been working together pretty effectively, TPO and District 7. We work together coordinating the regional demand model that's done at District 7 with District 7 staff. Each of the MPOs across the region pay into a fund to finance that modeling work, and we're part of the modeling committee. We also look to D7 for technical assistance in developing like revenue forecasts so we can figure out how much money will be available to deliver projects in the future. And then later on in the process of developing the LRTP, we're going to look to D7 staff to give us feedback and complete reviews on our public engagement plan, our cost feasible plan. So we will be taking their feedback into consideration at some point. I think we're in a really good place with them right now. And last, for federal stakeholders, I'm going to assume that you mean like Federal Highway Administration and the Transit Administration. I think that we could probably coordinate with them a little bit better to deliver this LRTP by requesting maybe like a milestone check-in. FHWA does a review of our LRTP for completion of that task. It's following its approval by the TPO board, just to make sure that it's in compliance with all the federal rules. But I think as we get closer to the midpoint of LRTP development, it might be worth reaching out to them and asking if they could take a better look and give us any suggestions for how to better narrate and describe our projects to make them more competitive for federal dollars a little bit later on down the line. Did that answer the question? Megan, I think
You're muted, Megan.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. How will you collaborate with other regional and local planning agencies on common missions like economic?
Megan, I didn't hear that last part. I think I heard, how did I
How will you
collaborate?
collaborate with other regional and local planning agencies on common missions like economic development and transportation?
I think I heard you say, how do I collaborate with regional agencies on economic development? And I didn't quite catch that last part.
Did you hear me?
Okay. It's will you collaborate with other regional and local planning agencies on common missions like economic development?
Sure. How will you collaborate with other regional and local planning agencies on common missions like economic development and transportation?
Okay, I got it. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. So I have, as staff to the TPO, I have periodically been tapped to work on work products that will be delivered to the SCTPA, Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance, the TMA Leadership Group, which is Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough counties, previously T-BARDA, although that's going to come to an end shortly. I think that those regional agencies have worked well enough, considering that they have a ton of limitations, right? They have limited financial resources. They don't have staff allocated specifically to working on tasks for any of those regional groups, with the exception of T-BARDA. But Hillsborough TPO has effectively utilized those groups to advocate for some pretty significant wins, and I've reported them to the TPO over the past few years. Despite all of the limitations of those groups, we've had a lot of success with the prioritization of projects that could be considered to have regional significance. We've had significant wins with Big Bend Road developing or delivering TRIP money, West Shore Interchange, 275. However, recognizing that we have effectively been able to utilize those mechanisms to deliver funds, I think a lot could be improved. With more members sitting on the boards of these regional agencies, I think that process could inherently become more democratic than it's ever been. I think the size of those boards is a limiting factor to pulling in opinions and feedback from more widespread cross-section of the county in the region. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for better advocacy, better understanding of projects to be achieved. Of course, the limiting factor, the weakness here is that it costs money, it costs time. You need to allocate more staff resources, requires more time to negotiate and navigate project details and resolve conflicts. Specifically for the TMA, I think that an advisory committee similar to our policy committee that could get together periodically, delve into the details of projects before they come before the TMA for a vote would be helpful. I think that that would create better opportunities to build more consensus. And kind of tying it into economic development, I think expanding the boards of these regional agencies would be a really good opportunity to bring in voices from the EDC, Economic Development Corporation, Tampa Bay Partnership, other agencies that may be involved in industrial recruitment. There could be a seat designated for the chambers of commerce across the county, large and small. We might even consider adding those seats to the Hillsborough TPO if that's the desire of the board. I think, again, expanding the size of the boards in these advisory committees makes the process inherently more democratic, allows you to tap in to different voices across the community, and will give agencies that focus on regional economic development a forum to talk about their strategic plan, and then we can better integrate that into our LRTP and our TIP and our work program.
All right, thank you. I'm going to try to read again and hopefully it sounds better. Describe your approach to discussions about an impending MPO merger with Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a very long and complicated topic, but for all of our benefit, I'll keep it very brief. And because I'm kind of in a unique position right now, I'll caveat this by saying I understand that this is not the position of the TPO board. They have not taken a position yet. My personal opinion is that the best approach is for us to be proactive and try to negotiate terms that are more favorable to Hillsborough County. I used to be one of those people who agreed with, or I used to be one of those people that thought a merger was a very bad idea. I think that, or I thought that there was a lot of potential for our voices to get lost, makes it more difficult for small cities to communicate issues of policy importance to them to a regional body. Advisory committees have the potential to get washed out. So I used to be pretty adamantly opposed to a merger. Professionally, I was also nervous about what my place in all of that would be. Would I have to find a new place to work? Would I have to commute a long distance to participate in this regional TPO or MPO if it happens? But regardless of that, I think the writing is on the wall. When the TPO board discussed this several months ago, I tended to agree with most of the opinions that were expressed, that this is either going to be a ghost that haunts us forever, or something that could be enacted quickly without our opinion. And both situations are problematic, right? We don't want to have to be operating with the, we wouldn't want to be operating as an individual MPO, knowing that at any time our work could be merged and we might have to merge quickly and drop what we've been working on specific to Hillsborough County and pick up new tasks. So understanding that we could put this all to an end by getting out and leading the process is now my preferred technique to dealing with issues or to dealing with the proposed merger. I think we can still put Hillsborough first. In my reading of the legislative bill and in my understanding of the merger study, I tend to adopt kind of a technocratic approach to it. I don't think that there are any details of the merger that cannot be resolved effectively with enough thought and with consensus of the three counties. In my mind, one of the biggest limitations is ensuring that the smaller voices have an opportunity to be heard. Small cities, our local, when I say local, I mean Hillsborough County interests from our citizens, especially in South County. It may be difficult for disparate groups to mobilize and have their voices be heard. And I think that a lot of my concerns can be resolved by being very strategic about how we propose the board to be structured. I think that the board has to be majority elected officials based on population would give Hillsborough County the edge. I think that the location of the board has to meet in Hillsborough County. That would also give us a greater advantage because our elected officials are closer to the body that they serve. I think in-person votes should be counted or in-person votes should only be counted with a merged MPO. And I'm even in favor of exploring unique structures of the bylaws. Hillsborough County has expressed a lot of concern that maybe our votes get dominated by the interests of Pinellas and Pasco counties. Maybe there's an issue where we stand apart and the two of them stand together and we would henceforth be overruled. I think to that end, it makes sense to maybe consider structuring the bylaws so that projects above a certain cost threshold require more than a simple majority. So, you know, just throwing numbers out there. If it's a $50 million, $100 million project or more, maybe it requires a 60% vote or even higher.
Thank you. Elaborate on the communication style and manner in which you work with your staff and at what levels you directly communicate.
Communication style that I use to work with my staff and how I communicate with them.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the door to my office is always open. I'm very personable around the office. Folks know that I hold good conversation. In any given day, I might have a handful of colleagues drop in to talk about anything with me, personal, professional, successes, challenges, anything in between. On my team specifically, again, we're kind of like a small to medium-sized team of 4, maybe more on occasion. I have promoted horizontalism with them. I prefer to show them that I'm willing to get my hands dirty with the work and not just delegate all tasks. I like to actually carve out a piece of all of our planning work for me to take the lead on. That's often data procurement or data analysis. And then I'm also the final stop in the QA/QC process for my entire team. So when we're processing tip amendments, when we're delivering the annual tip or congestion management plan or any of the one-off plans that our team is responsible for, I'm always the final stop in that process, checking their work and giving them suggestions for how they can go back and improve. So I guess in short, I like to communicate with them very directly, not just on my team, but folks around the office. On the other teams, I prefer very intimate, like one-on-one conversations so that I can get a sense of the subtext, because some folks may not be willing to express everything that's on their mind in a large group. Communicating tasks, kind of like delegating tasks to them. I have I have sought to mentor all of my team on every responsibility of my team to ensure that there's redundancy. If we have staff turnover or vacations, there should always be at least one, if not more, people on our team capable of completing every task, myself included. I've done a lot of cross-training with our modeling folks and our GIS folks to ensure that I at least understand enough to manage a project if they happen to go on vacation. The way that we delegate tasks at the TPO, not just specific to my team, is there are 3 teams. Gina Torres has the like active transportation team, intergovernment liaison. Allison Ye does mostly financials. My team does data analysis, TIP. We kind of take the lead in the LRTP. So at the very top, tasks are delegated, but within each team, they have the flexibility to assign tasks as appropriate. And I would probably continue that organizational structure if I become the director, because I think it's worked fairly well over the past few years.
Thank you. Hillsborough County consists of both urbanized and rural areas. And there are citizens in each that are interested in preserving their existing lifestyles. What experience do you have in planning for both urban and rural areas?
Okay. Yeah, I'll start by saying I think I am that market. I am an urban professional. I live in the city, but I like to get out and enjoy nature. I enjoy experiencing the rural lifestyle. I like to off-road and camp, so I definitely appreciate those amenities that Hillsborough County has to offer. Kayaking is one of my favorite things to do with my kids. The TPO doesn't have specific staff assigned to work with just the cities or just unincorporated county. In that way, we're all kind of generalists. So we all have to work within the constraints of urban transportation projects, what the urban needs are versus what the rural needs are of unincorporated county. I think in order for our agency to succeed in preserving an urban lifestyle, we have to better understand what that means. When we go out to the public, specifically in the city of Tampa, portions of Temple Terrace, portions of Plant City, and some of the larger communities across the county like Brandon, they tell us that they want greater density. Specifically, they want to be within walking distance of transit routes. They want to have access to destinations via walking and biking. They don't want to live 5+ miles away from the destinations that they need to get to, schools, hospitals, their jobs. Overwhelmingly, I hear that they want lower speed roads within dense urban environments, greater crossing opportunities. Similar to what I just mentioned, they want full sidewalk coverage on both sides of the road so that they don't have to cross over at every intersection. I hear protected bike lanes come up a lot. And I think that that works fine. I think that we're positioned well to create a buffer between that dense urban lifestyle and the amenities that are offered in the rural parts of the county with suburban retrofits, kind of like smoothing the transition from very dense urban environments out to more rural environments. When I talk to folks in the rural parts of the county, Sun City Center, pretty far down there, I hear often that they want to protect their forested areas more so than protecting just a very general rural lifestyle. I hear that they want to protect specific amenities like wildlife. They want peace and serenity. They don't want roads where traffic is, going past their house very quickly and very loud. They want development patterns, again, that kind of offer a buffer between the suburbs and the more dense urban parts of the county. The challenge, of course, is that folks in South County that I speak with that want a rural lifestyle may not make their money in the traditional rural ways. They're not overwhelmingly farmers and miners. They often do have to travel to Brandon or Tampa or any of the key economic areas to make their money. Ensuring that they have economic freedom while also having the freedom to get away from the urban environment is a really difficult challenge. Yeah, I think I said enough on that. In short, like I'm kind of a generalist. I have had opportunities to plan for rural versus urban. To the best of my understanding, those are the needs that I hear from the community. And if given the opportunity to be the director, I would take those needs to heart into every plan that we produce.
Thank you. Considering the rapid growth and congestion in parts of our county, how do you see the balance between roadway capacity improvements and public transportation options?
All right. Rapid growth and congestion in our county. What's the ideal balance between roadway capacity improvements and transit options?
Yes.
That's also kind of a tricky question because growth in the county has a lot of benefits, right? Within Tampa, Temple Terrace, parts of Plant City and parts of the county, that population growth translates into density, which might be welcomed. Density creates a lot of opportunities for employment and generally grows the economy. So that part is welcome. The delay and the unreliability in travel times, the great distance to access necessary goods and commodities is the downside to that, or I guess an unwelcome side effect of that growth. Solving the congestion problem, I think, is a lot more complex than simply adding capacity. I do agree with a lot of the folks talk about capacity encouraging even greater traffic. So whatever capacity we add, I view as ephemeral, right? It's going to last for a period of time, and then it will encourage greater development potential along that corridor, and eventually we'll be back to considering how we deal with that congestion. That being said, I don't think it's a zero-sum game. Roadway capacity improvements could be designed in a way to facilitate better public transit. I do think that we should take that into consideration anytime we're exploring a widening or an extension or an elevation of an existing corridor. I'm also a big proponent of investing in TSMO, like technological improvements to better facilitate traffic flow and improve reliability. That to me is a better improvement, or that those interim improvements are better than automatically jumping to the most expensive option, which is to widen or extend or elevate. We have a lot of tools in the toolbox, and I'm in favor of the TPO being more willing to explore the full suite of improvements that we have access to. I definitely think that if we want to preserve rural lifestyle and not continue to expand capacity, we've got to invest time in taking a look at more tech-oriented improvements. That being said, on the flip side of that question, if you're asking whether or not I support transit, yes, I'm very supportive of transit. I think that that's maybe one of the most important modes of travel for segments of the economy. A lot of blue-collar employers and their employees rely on the bus to facilitate access to that labor market. The more we invest in our transit system, the greater opportunity that employers have to access specific skills in the labor market.
Thank you. Describe your experience working in an organization that was led or guided by a board of individuals, such as directors, citizens, elected or appointed officials. What was your approach to topics that were controversial among the board or committee members?
Okay, my experience. All of my work experience has been in organizations or institutions that have been governed in the public trust. I've spent more than 7 years working at the TPO. Before that, I taught classes at USF and University of Tampa. I guess University of Tampa is not in the public trust, but USF definitely. Before that, I worked at a think tank in Indiana, the Epley Institute for Parks and Public Lands. So I have a ton of experience working for governing boards that have to answer to people in the community. My work at the TPO definitely brought me closest to those individuals. So that's my experience. As well, pertaining to my experience and my approach to dealing with controversial topics, I don't shy away from difficult conversations or controversial topics. I think expressing concerns and reservations about important topics is a sign of a healthy democracy and democratic process. Dealing with controversies and negotiating, finding common ground, I think is a really useful opportunity to repair relationships among people that may disagree. regarding the TPO and how it can more effectively negotiate controversial issues in the community. I think that doing that symbolizes that, again, the process is healthy. It establishes trust of the process. It allows parts of the community to feel that their delegates and their representatives are effectively communicating their interests in the public sphere. I have personally presented a number of controversial topics to the TPO board over the years. Just off the top of my head, the DTI, Downtown Interchange Project, quick fix, managed lanes near the West Shore Interchange. One example that I think probably best illustrates how I would deal with controversial topics is a presentation I made to the TPO back in February on a proposal to remove lanes of I-275 that are already in the adopted LRTP. To put that presentation together, I reached out to all staff of the TPO based on their subject matter expertise. I encouraged them to submit questions to me that might come up from each of the board members. And based on any issues that they saw with either keeping the lanes in the LRTP or removing them, kind of educated myself on all the implications of those decision points. Also coordinated very effectively with FDOT to model the implications of removing those lanes. And I tried to tailor the implications to each of the local governments. So I looked at, we did analysis to identify how the traffic patterns would change in Plant City, how they would change in Temple Terrace, on county-owned roads within the city of Tampa, and explored what the impacts would be on commuters. How much or how many minutes of delay might they be looking at if this project is removed from the LRTP? So just to generally synthesize all of that, with my team, I did a before action report. So I reached out to all members of the TPO, asking them to solicit topics that we should investigate, coordinated very closely with the affected agencies, and then tried to tailor my report to each of the local governments represented on the TPO.
All right, thank you. So at this time and our remaining time, I'm going to open it up to the panel for any additional questions they may have.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Wong, I believe that you deserve an opportunity to, when this was originally announced, the immediate response from the outgoing executive director, you were in the room, was that none of the staff are currently ready to step up to this role, which is why she wouldn't recommend any internal position. So I was obviously surprised to see not only an internal candidate, but one that also had a recommendation letter from her by their name. So explain to me maybe what that original thought process was and why she was wrong.
Yeah, thanks for giving me this opportunity to expand on that, Commissioner. So a long time ago, Beth had given a few hints that made me think about, made me kind of realize that she might be looking at moving on to either another career or same career in a different area. Essentially, I could tell that retirement was imminent. Being one of the team leaders, myself and the other two, we were kind of, our suspicions were confirmed a little bit sooner than other staff. Beth did reach out to me to ask if I had any interest in applying for the position, just to feel me out. And at that time, I gave her an enthusiastic yes. And after thinking about it for about a month, I came to the realization that maybe it wasn't the right time. I had some questions about whether or not I could fulfill the requirements of the job and perform to the best of my abilities and be responsive to the TPO, because one aspect of this is staying in regular communication with you all basically throughout the day, 24/7, if I'm being honest. If one of the commissioners, councilmen, any member of the TPO board, if they call Beth, she's expected to answer or respond very shortly after if she misses that call. So when Beth first approached me to let me know that she was planning on retiring, my older son had just started kindergarten, and that was, there was a lot to that process. So I was kind of stressed out from that. At the same time, our younger son was 3 months old, and needless to say, there was a lot of stress with that. I felt at the time that with 2 young kids, maybe seeking out this position in 4 or 5 years or at some point later in my career would have been preferable. Since that time, my family life has kind of caught a nice rhythm and a groove. We've been able to communicate or coordinate our schedules better. My kids are doing better in school. Everything in my personal life is coming along very well. I think that now I can say that my personal life is organized sufficiently to allow me to perform to the best of my abilities in my professional life. I hope that answers your question. Just like in short, when she first brought this up, I was stressed out with my young kids, and now I don't feel that way anymore.
Okay. Just one follow on about your comments about the rural area. I can tell you that I do know most of the farmers and most of the large landowners, and I'm active with the Hillsborough County Cattlemen. I would tell you that most of them do actually, in the actual rural areas, they do live in those rural areas, and a lot of the traffic that they have in those areas is usually the commercial vehicles that are required for them to do business.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the complaints come from those areas is from those commercial vehicles. So I would ask that in those rural areas you had mentioned about preserving green space, but our challenge is in the TPO is not managing green space, it's managing transportation, and it's how would you promote with your urban skills a robust transportation network for the commercial needs, excluding any other desires from members of the community about the land use.
Commissioner, thanks for that insight. Based on your response, this is clearly a more complex issue than I can address in the few minutes that we have left. I would say that I'm open to exploring any resolution that works well for the commercial freight industry, recognizing that they need to do their job and deliver goods to market, as well as the farmers that produce those goods. While commercial freight is very important, I would want to do my best to ensure that we're delivering results that work for the farmers that live within this county, because I view those as constituents closer to the TPO. Just off the top of my head, maybe we could explore like a commercial hub, like a farmer's market type structure where commercial freight goes to pick up goods from one more centralized location rather than making a bunch of disparate pickups and deliveries to individual locations. I don't know. I'm willing to discuss this with you all more offline, and irrespective of the director position, this seems like an issue that we're going to have to deal with at some point in the future. So whether it's me discussing this in a director capacity or staff, I'd like to learn more about it.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. We have just a minute left, so if a panel member has time and would like to ask you a question, please go ahead.
This is Commissioner Myers. Can you hear me?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay, I have one question, and thank you so much, Mr. Young. In reviewing your information and looking over your credentials for this position, one of the things that I noticed that you did not have the AIC. What was your reason that you have never been certified, taken a test to become a certified planner?
Yeah, so I just became eligible to sit for that exam about a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago. And like I kind of explained to Commissioner Wassel just a moment ago, that was not a time where I had sufficient free time to study for the exam and then sit for it due to family obligations. I do plan on getting the AICP at some point in my career. To this point in my career, not having the certification has not held me back, I don't think. My skill set that I bring to the TPO is more as a economic geographer. I tend to look at things with an economic lens and bring in planning principles to support my work. That being said, I recognize that having AICP is important to send a message to staff that that's something we encourage, and it gives greater credibility to my decision making. So at some point, I will sit for the AICP. I just, since I've been eligible, I haven't had a ton of time to sit down and study for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Johnny, if you do have any questions, I know we didn't have time to get to yours, but if you have any questions that you would like the panel to answer, please feel free to email them to me and I'll make sure we get them answered for you.
All right, great, will do.
All right, thank you, panel. Oh, yes, Mayor Ross.
I have a question. Do we all need to log out and then log back into a new meeting for each candidate, or will this one will not continue?
That is correct. There's another link that will go that you should see. So if you have any issues, and Cheryl and Gail are available to help as well.
Very good. Thank you. And good luck, Dr. Wong, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you all. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.